Welcome back to our program. I'm your host, Raymond Wu. We're continuing our conversation with Mr. Paul Thurston, a managing director with Deloitte Touche in Taiwan, on the importance of environmental protection. Paul, you mentioned earlier about the United Nations Environment Protection Program. Can you give us a little more detail and the background of the program, and what some of the meetings or conferences that you've attended? What was the experience like, and what would be some of the things that you can share with our viewers back home?
Sure, Raymond.
Okay.
Yeah, I've been fortunate enough to be a delegate to the United Nations Environmental Program Summits.
Okay.
Two most
recent
ones.
Okay, good.
One in 2005 in Aichi, Japan,
Okay.
just outside of Nagoya. The other was more recently, 2008 summit
Okay.
held in Stavanger, Norway.
Yes. And then what were some of the things that were discussed in those summits?
I think the focus is kind of driven by the current environment.
Okay.
For the 2008 summit, we focused on biodiversity, we focused on water, and we focused on climate change.
Yes.
And the fourth one was sustainable consumption.
Okay.
That was always also part of the most recent summit.
Naturally, yes. And what were some of the recommendations or consensus reached at the summit, for example, in 2008, on those four topics that you mentioned?
Well, the children come up with, and the main takeaway from the summit is
Yes.
coming up with their commitments. This is what I will do.
Okay.
As a delegate to the summit, this is when I leave.
Okay.
This is what I have committed to do. What we found with the children is that they get very passionate and excited to be leading up to the summit, during the summit, and then as they return to their home countries, the level of passion might drop off, because we're dealing with children that are between 8 and 13, 14 years old, and so they get a little bit preoccupied. But this is definitely the target audience that UNEP is trying to focus in on,
Yes.
raising that awareness for the younger children, because as they grow up,
Yes.
they won't make the mistakes that we have.
Yeah.
So the children come up with commitments for each one of those specific focus areas for each summit.
Okay.
And like I said, for sustainable consumption, for example, this was an area looking at things you can do to
Yes.
sustain consumption, meaning the focus area there was to reduce our consumption.
Okay.
Was the focus area there, and the children came up with ideas of what they can do, what they would give up. They would give up some of their cookies and their candies and things like that. So it was good to see children getting involved like that.
Yeah. Was there a large Taiwanese representation at the summit, or were there people that attended the summit and was able to bring back some of their findings and share with the people here in Taiwan?
My daughter and I were the sole representatives from Taiwan.
Oh, good. Okay.
So we did have a chance to come back, and I've spoken on a variety of venues about this topic, as well as through the Taipei American School.
Okay.
They have a very strong economic program there for the children to get involved in.
Okay. And what would you remember from the summit in 2008? What were some of the challenges or difficulties or problems that in terms of raising awareness on the importance of environmental protection, not only in Taiwan but around the world? What were some of the things that people raised during the summit?
One of the biggest problems that we were coming up with was how to execute, how to actually implement some of the bigger ideas. And it's really going to take a commitment from countries, I think, at that level. We talked earlier about the Kyoto Protocol not being signed by certain countries, including my own in the United States, and the impact that that has on the world front. And how can we influence our regulators and our representatives to Congress, the President of the United States, to make this important, participate in these world accords, these world international agreements, and be a little leader in the movement.
So we're still waiting to see if the new administration in Washington will do things a little differently. But another thing that we have been talking is, what can we do here in Taiwan? And Taiwan, of course, in the 60s and 70s, experienced very high and rapid economic growth rates. And at the time, I don't think people were paying too much attention on the importance of the environmental protection issues. As the 1980s came around, after we've achieved sustained economic growth, and people start being more socially conscientious and paying closer attention to issues like consumer protection, environmental protection. Those were the causes of the 1980s in Taiwan. And I would certainly hope that the quality of environment back in 1980, some 20 some years ago, compared to today in 2009, the environmental protection concerns in Taiwan have raised the public awareness that the quality of environment, quality of life here in Taiwan, has really improved. But how would you, as somebody who's been in Taiwan for 3 years, assess the current quality of the environment in Taiwan overall, not just in Taipei, but other parts of the island as well?
Well, I think you're right, Raymond, that the focus has been on the environment, and improvements have been made since those boom years back in the 80s when there really wasn't a focus area. It was just mainly on manufacturing. So people are aware of it. People are very passionate about the environment, and they take it very seriously here in Taiwan, which is good to see. It's good to see people out picking up trash or planting trees up in Yangmingshan, up in the areas there. I think Taiwan needs to focus more on infrastructure and improving waste disposal, water reclamation, and more efficient use of energy. Those are some key things that I think Taiwan needs to focus on.
Well, another thing that we've been discussing, before taping of the program, was the sense that alternative energy use is certainly being huge the world over, especially in Taiwan. For example, on solar energy, that we have some of the leading solar energy cell manufacturers in Taiwan, some of which might have been your clients. But we understand that although we are one of the leading manufacturers of solar cells, but where our usage of solar cells in Taiwan are very, very limited. Maybe the biggest public project that we see the extensive use of solar cells is the Kaohsiung Stadium for the World Game this year in the summer. Okay, but other than that, we don't see many private buildings or public projects that would extensively use solar cells, solar panels, and other solar-related technologies. How do you explain that as somebody who's very passionate about the environment, and also being almost daily constant touch with all these technology firms? How would you reconcile the inconsistency, if you want to call it that way?
Taiwan does have some of the more key players in the industry. It's very impressive to see some of these companies grow up in the technology that they do have. I think what's key about alternative energy is involvement from the government. Incentives need to be made to companies and to individuals to utilize this technology. I think that's going to be a key driver in really making it more sustainable, more common in usage. Take, for example, in the United States, where even there it's not very common, but we're giving tax breaks to companies that are focused in this area, more incentives, more concessions being provided to companies to encourage them to use alternative energy sources. So hopefully that'll take off here as well. But the government needs to get involved and be a proactive player.
Yes, and also the fact is, maybe in Taiwan, one of the advantages that we have is our cost per consumption of electricity compared with other places like Japan, Singapore, and the United States is relatively low. So there isn't that incentives to extend the usage of alternative energy in Taiwan. People are so much used to, of course, conservation of energy, electricity, certainly being part of our daily routine for some time. But the fact of the matter remains is that people are not, in such a dire needs of exploring other alternative energy sources like solar or wind power. Would you think that's also something that we need to change in terms of the public awareness, in terms of now because the electricity is cheaper in Taiwan, that we don't need to explore the use of solar power or wind power or others? Would you think that's something that the government and the people here can do together?
I think so. I think that's another key factor in deploying alternative energy and making it more common use. If you look at what's done in Europe, is that when oil prices come down, it's not immediately felt by the consumer. So the biggest fear factor, if you will, on alternative energy companies is that when oil comes down, it's going to have a direct impact on them. Because more people find that fossil fuels are
Yeah,
are
affordable
cheap,
again.
Affordable again.
Yes.
So we'll just stay with those that we have.
Yeah.
And so if you can prevent that, that reversion, if you will, back to fossil fuels, keep it focused on alternative energies, making it more acceptable for use.
Yes.
Hopefully getting awareness out.
Yeah.
I keep coming back to awareness.
Yeah.
And I think it will take off.
Yeah. And also, one final question, Paul, is the fact that we're talking before the program about some of the newer technologies that are being, explored, being researched on in solar area. For example, the CIGS and also the thin film, possibilities. Would you think that those newer technologies, once they become more feasible, and also in terms of the cost, that will come way down? Would you think that will help in terms of this, the spread of use of solar power cells in Taiwan as well as in other places?
Yeah, in fact, our Deloitte Research Group came out with a recent prediction. Every year they come up with certain predictions for the TMT industry, technology, media, and telecommunications. One of their key trends that they're spotting is a move to new technology that is focused on improving energy sources.
Yes.
You see a leakage of energy, you can come up with technology to fix that leak, therefore controlling costs, making the company more efficient. So I think as technology changes, that's going to drive the usage of thin film exponentially, I think.
Yeah, okay. I want to thank you, Paul, for coming on to the Taiwan Outlook. I also want to thank the viewers for watching us at home. And I want to see you next time on MacroView Television. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, Raymond. Appreciate it. Okay.